Deep in the mountains of Japan, hidden away from modern civilization, lay the village of Shirakawa. The village was ancient, dating back centuries, and it had remained untouched by time. However, no one dared to visit it, and those who did never returned. The locals in the nearby towns whispered about a cursed sun that ensured that anyone who stepped into Shirakawa would never leave the forbidden ritual. The story begins in the late 1800s. When a wandering monk named Ryohei arrived at a small town near the mountains. He had heard tales of Shirakawa and was curious about why it had been abandoned. The elders of the town warned him to stay away, but Ryohei was determined. One elder, an old woman with sunken eyes, finally relented and told him the village's dark secret. Many years ago, Shirakawa was home to a powerful shrine maiden, Lady Mitsuko, who was known for her beauty and wisdom. However, the villagers grew jealous of her power. Fearing that she had become too influential, they believed she had been consorting with spirits and practicing forbidden rituals. One fateful night, the village leaders dragged her to the shrine at the center of the village and burned her alive. Calling it a purification ritual, as the flames consumed her, she screamed a curse upon Shirakawa, vowing that no soul would ever escape its grip. The next morning, the entire village was abandoned. Every single villager had disappeared without a trace. The monk's journey, despite the horrifying tale, Ryo is not afraid. He set off into the mountains, determined to uncover the truth. It took him hours to find Shirakawa, but when he finally reached it, he was stunned. The village stood perfectly preserved, as if it had been frozen. In time, houses remained intact. The shrine still loomed in the center, and the streets were lined with old wooden lanterns. But something was deeply wrong. There were no signs of life. No birds chirped, no insects buzzed, and the air was thick with an eerie silence. The deeper he walked into the village, the stronger the feeling of being watched became. Ryohei entered one of the houses and found a meal still laid out on the table, as if the family had simply vanished in the middle of their dinner. The food was fresh, impossibly fresh. Dust did not coat the furniture, and the air smelled of incense, as if someone had been living there moments before. As night fell, Ryohei decided to stay in the village and investigate further. He took shelter in one of the larger houses, lighting a candle and preparing for the night. But as the moon rose high, he heard it whispers. They were softer, first like the wind rustling through leaves. Then they grew louder, turning into the voices of many people speaking in an ancient dialect he could barely understand. Then the knocking began. The spirits of Shirakawa. It started at the wall, slow and deliberate. Then it moved to the ceiling, as if something unseen was crawling above him. The candle flickered violently, and the shadows in the room twisted unnaturally. A chill ran down Ryohei's spine. He tried to remain calm, whispering a prayer, but the whispers turned into desperate cries. The air grew heavy with the scent of burning flesh. Suddenly, the door to the room slid open on its own. Standing in the doorway was a woman in a white kimono, her long black hair covering her face. Her feet did not touch the ground. Ryohei gasped, his voice caught in his throat. The woman slowly lifted her head, revealing hollow, charred eye sockets that oozed black blood. "You should not have come," she whispered, a voice layered with many others. Ryohei stumbled backward, but the room around him began to shift. The walls darkened, the floor rotted beneath him, and outside, the village was no longer pristine. It was a ruin of burnt buildings and skeletal remains. He was seeing the village as it truly was, the endless nightmare. Panicking, Ryohei ran toward the shrine, hoping to find a way out, but no matter how far he ran, he kept ending up back in front of the same building. The spirits of the villagers now surrounded him, distorted, burnt, and filled with rage. Then, Lady Mitsuko appeared before him, her face twisted in sorrow. "You must take my place," she murmured. "Only then will the curse be broken." Before he could react, the spirits lunged at him, their cold hands pulling him into darkness. The next morning, the village of Shirakawa remained untouched, empty as it had always been. But in the nearby town, an elder woman awoke from a nightmare, clutching her chest. She knew another traveler had been lost, and in the heart of Shirakawa, a new figure stood at the shrine, a monk in tattered robes, his eyes hollow, his soul now bound to the cursed village forever. To this day, Shirakawa remains hidden, waiting for its next visitor. Will you be the next to wander into its trap?